right, so the first thing that we want to dive into is understanding the difference between thought versus thinking, all right? And I'm gonna say that again, thought versus thinking. I know it's really difficult to be processing through and thinking about what we're thinking, right? The thing is though, that when it comes to performance, especially competitively, we want to avoid the thinking. And if we are thinking, we want to think specifically on things that are within our control. And that's why it's important to begin to talk about this, because there is a difference. And thought is just a one-time something comes to mind. And there's a place where those come from. They're either external impressions, so the outside world feeding into what maybe we're telling ourselves, or the internal inspiration that just deeply ingrained in who we are, this is what comes out. And so typically just something comes to mind, and that's a thought, and then maybe it fades. But then there's thinking. And thinking looks like having that thought, and then it driving an emotion and a behavior, and then us thinking further on it, and we get into this cycle. And I know you've experienced that. Missing a shot, maybe dropping a pass, maybe missing a ball. All of a sudden we get into this process and this cycle of thinking that is not performance enhancing. And so in that first video we talked about, we want to recognize the performance enhancing thought processes and patterns, but we also want to recognize and disrupt the ones that aren't. And so there might be specific ones you're thinking right now of, when I experience this or that, I end up getting into this space, right? And so we want to avoid that type of thinking. And if we are going to think, we want to go to the internal inspiration and think on that. The other piece with this is that your thoughts drive your emotions, and your emotions drive your behaviors, which is something I just spoke on. And it's very important to understand that, because there are certain emotions that drive behaviors that we don't necessarily like. We don't want to experience or see or have. And all of those are rooted back into a thought, all right? And so it looks like this. You might be in a game and you're on the line for a free throw shot, and you miss that shot, okay? You might initially go to the thought of, well, what about the scoreboard? What about the time? What are my parents gonna say? What are my teammates gonna say? Oh, I just let them down. And they're all external impressions that are driving a thought loop that is not helping you be in the moment, because you're thinking about everything outside of your control and from the past and maybe even in the future. And so the challenge with that would be go back to finding a single thought, like that internal inspiration, and being able to focus on that of, like, I've been here before. I trust myself. Be where my feet are. I was trained for this moment, right? Those are all internal inspirations that allow you to be where your feet are. And so today what I want you to do is I want you to audit yourself and talk with a teammate, talk maybe with your team. When you are at your best, physically, mentally, emotionally, I want you to evaluate, are you in that thinking, emotion, behavior, thinking, emotion, behavior on things outside of your control, on things from the past or in the future, on things that are not performance enhancing? Or when you are at your best, are you in a state of maybe a thought comes to mind and you're taking action on it, or maybe you're not thinking at all, right? I want you to evaluate and answer that question for yourself today.